Welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 66th Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1993. Jane Campion became the first and still only woman to win the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival for her drama The Piano, about a mute Scottish woman who is sent to New Zealand for an arranged marriage. The film became a major critic favorite in 1993, and Jane Campion became just the second woman in Oscar history to be nominated for Best Director. But despite this breakthrough success, it simply could not overpower the force that was Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List when it came to Best Picture. So why did The Piano come up short in the end? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to The Piano. Hello, and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I am your host, Kevin Jacobson, and today with me I have another returning guest. She is a podcaster and writer for AwardsCircuit. She is a podcaster for Citizen Dame and The Watch and Talk. And now, most importantly, she is a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic.
Yay!
Back by popular demand, it's Karen Peterson.
Hi, thank you
Hello.
so much.
No problem. I'm excited to have you back on for yet another amazing year of the Oscars.
Such a great year. Yes,
Yes.
I'm excited.
Oh, yeah. So today we are going to be talking about The Piano, not to be confused with The Pianist. If you're lost, that is the 2002 episode. I did that 9 years ago. So this is The Piano. Okay, just establishing that off the top. So let's get into a quick summary of The Piano before we jump on in. It is a drama set in the 19th century about a mute Scottish woman named Ada McGrath, who is sent to New Zealand for an arranged marriage with a landowner. And so she's shipped over to New Zealand with her young daughter, Flora, and her beloved piano, both of which she uses to communicate with others. And once she's on land, there's this local Scottish man who has sort of integrated into the local Maori people who takes a liking to her and arranges to have her teach him piano lessons, while also having very lustful ulterior motives. And from there, we kind of just find Ada stuck in this love triangle and trying to make the best of her circumstances. So the film stars Holly Hunter as Ada, a young Anna Paquin as her daughter Flora, Sam Neill as Alasdair Stewart, who's the man she is arranged to be married to, and Harvey Keitel as George Baines, the local who takes a liking to her. So The Piano was written and directed by Jane Campion, who, with this film, became the first woman to earn both a nomination in Best Director and also have her film nominated for Best Picture. Took 66 years for that. And the film made $40 million at the box office. And I had to do a little digging for the worldwide total, but I found that it had made $140 million worldwide. So the film went on to earn 8 Oscar nominations and won 3 of them, but not Best Picture. So, Karen, what are your thoughts on The Piano?
All right. So it's funny because I know we had talked about this before, about the fact that a lot of times people that are coming on to your show, it's because they really are excited and love the runner-up that we're going to be talking about. And I don't love The Piano.
Uh-oh.
Now, I don't hate it like a lot of people seem to, but I don't love this movie much at all. It's, I watched it again the other day for the first time in a while. I've seen it a few times, and I think every time that I watch it, I find more things to appreciate about it. But overall, I find it's a film that's very much a technical achievement, but very emotionally void. I find it very cold and I don't know. It's very hard for me to connect to it on any level other than appreciating the technical aspects of it. So, kind of my basic thoughts.
Yeah, so it's more of a appreciate with your head more than with your heart sort of deal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is interesting because, as you mentioned, this is a kind of unique scenario because this is probably the first time, I'd have to check, but probably the first time that I actually love a movie more than my guest.
Wow.
There have been situations where my guest has loved a movie more than I have, aka the Cider House Rules, Michael Schwartz. um, but this, I think, is probably the first situation where I very much appreciate a movie a lot more than my guest does because I really, really like this movie a lot. I think it's very poetic, it's very lyrical, it's gothic in nature, which I kind of have a predilection towards anyway, so I appreciate that. Um, Kind of Twin Peaksy in a way with like the trees and the wind, and it's all very interesting mixture of the beauty and the ugly side. And it really feels like to me like it would have been based on like a novel from centuries ago, which is kind of what Jane Campion has said, that she's kind of loosely felt inspired by Wuthering Heights and the Bronte sisters and that era. And I do feel that sense that this is kind of based in a sense of classical novel in that way. I really love Holly Hunter in this movie. I think she is very expressive. Obviously, she is playing a mute character, so she has to use her facial expressions and her body language to communicate literally everything about her character. So that is very impressive, and I think she manages to do it really well. And I just find this casting in particular to be so fascinating because obviously we know and love Holly Hunter for her very unique Southern twang voice. And, this is a role that makes her do the opposite of that. And I think she does it extremely well. I also really like Anna Paquin. And the two men in the movie aren't obviously as good as the women, but still, I think, add an interesting dynamic between the two of them. So let's just dive into some of the themes of the movie and we can see where we might differ on interpretations and whatnot.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, it's funny though, really quickly though. It's
Yeah.
funny because you make that comparison to Wuthering Heights, which I think is very apt, and I actually hate Wuthering Heights.
Okay.
So, I mean, that may explain a little bit about where I'm coming from in a film like this. I need to emotionally connect to the characters, and if I find everybody in a film generally unlikable, or I just don't have a reason to root for them, it makes it very hard for me to enjoy it. So,
right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think they are very, very flawed and complex characters, and sometimes I do appreciate that. For me, it worked in this experience, which, by the way, I should mention off the top. First time in 25 episodes that I've watched a movie for the first time for this show.
Oh, wow.
So that is something. So I'm very like fresh and like kind of in it right now. And I haven't really had like the passage of time to really think about it or forget about it or, think about its place in history and stuff like that. So I'm coming at this from an interesting perspective, I think, compared to you who have kind of, seen it multiple times throughout your life and appreciated different things about it along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's just talk about some of these themes because it is a very romantic film. It's erotic. It is very feminist to a lot of people. To others, they don't say so. What is your take on just what the movie itself is trying to say ultimately?
So that's where I get a little bit stuck because I think that I think the movie believes that it is feminist, but I don't know that it fully accomplishes that because, and especially looking at it now, 25 years later, because when I saw it back then, I mean, back when I first saw it when it came out, I didn't like it because I thought it was kind of boring, but to be honest, but later I thought, oh, but it is kind of this sweet love story. And then I think about it now through completely different eyes. And I'm just like, basically, she ends up just kind of attaching herself to this guy just because he's nice to her after she has to let him do a bunch of stuff to her just so she can have a little bit of freedom. And that is so gross to me now. It's just like, oh, and I understand it's the 1850s, so times are definitely different, but
right.
the feminist in me shrieks at the things that she does, and the fact that she's essentially ends up, there's this sense that she ends up falling for this man just because he's the only guy that's nice to her, and that is the most anti-feminist thing I can think of. So
that makes sense. And I definitely did feel on this watch, having it been 25 years later, kind of seeing it through 2018 eyes and being a little like, oh, she's just going to end up falling for this guy who was just, obviously very leering towards her and putting her in a very, very uncomfortable situation. And she just kind of ends up falling for her anyway in sort of a weird, almost Stockholm syndrome sort of situation. But
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And the thing is that we see this a lot now too. I mean, he believes that he's being a nice person. He believes that he's being a good guy to her. He doesn't know that he's actually being really awful, and that he's treating her like an object and not like a person.
Mm-hmm. And I think, though, that eventually the movie does show how she starts to take control, at least, of the situation by, negotiating the amount of keys, quote unquote, the symbolic keys that she gets to win back after the lessons, by negotiating that and sort of having things be slightly ish in a compromise of their own terms. It just gets really hazy, but
Yeah, she takes control in the only way that she can. And again, I mean, you do have to think from the perspective that this is the 1850s,
right.
And she doesn't have the same freedom to state her mind. Right. I mean, she was sold into a marriage, essentially. Exactly. So, when you look at it through that lens, it is different. So
yeah, and it's kind of like, I don't know where else she can go almost at certain times. It's also a very constricting feeling film. It does have those very small houses, and I think it really gives you that sense of like claustrophobia and feeling stuck and, wanting to break free, and she can't, and she's kind of just going with her own weird impulses. So it is, I definitely understand what you're saying. I think if I watched it again, maybe I would pick up on that more.
Well, and I don't think there's necessarily a wrong way to interpret it. I think that there are things that you can pull from it that it's like, well, I mean, if flipping it to the other side, I mean, you can look at it from the perspective that she doesn't have any other options and she's making the best of the situation in the way that she decides to do, because she doesn't have to give in to him. It's not like he rapes her.
Right.
So there is that as well. And I understand that. It's just, for me, looking at it, I'm just like, ugh. Maybe if it wasn't Harvey Keitel, I would feel differently.
Well, yeah, that's actually a good transition, because I wanted to talk about the casting happening in this movie, because I talked about the Holly Hunter a little bit against type for her. Definitely against type for Harvey Keitel.
Oh, yeah.
To be this Scottish import to New Zealand love interest. And kind of just the person that is being lusted after at a certain point in her eyes.
Yeah, he's
very
not
interesting casting.
Yeah, he's not someone you see as the romantic lead.
No,
ever.
Not really. Yeah. And that's what I find so interesting, that it's, against someone like Sam Neill, who might be a little more conventionally attractive, and in a different movie, the roles might have been reversed, because I think Harvey Keitel could certainly play someone who is like, very sexually pent up and like just angry and forceful, like Sam Neill's character is. So.
Yeah.
I think, I always like some inspired casting choices, and I don't necessarily think Harvey Keitel is like great in the movie, but at least I appreciate, the odd nature of the riskiness of this, and I think it makes for a strangely compelling watch. It's a very strange movie, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, and the thing with Harvey Keitel is it is an unconventional choice. He's a very strange decision. But at the same time, it's not a disaster to have him in that. So from that point of view, it's kind of, I mean, it's good to see him try something new and have it mostly work.
Yeah. And I think he does kind of have like a raw, primal sort of madly energy to him that kind of makes sense for the situation. So there's that at least.
Yeah. I'm thinking, I'm actually imagining if the roles were reversed, if it was Harvey Keitel as Alistair and Sam Neill as Baines. Like, I'm picturing that in my head.
And what's the picture you're getting?
I don't think that would work.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, let's talk now about the other main performance in the movie, Anna Paquin, who is 10 years old in the movie, wins an Oscar for it. What's your take on this performance?
So when I saw it the first time, I remember being annoyed because she screams so much.
Yes, and it's that piercing scream.
Yes, that piercing little girl scream that you just are like, shut up, shut up, shut up. But my most recent rewatch, I was really focusing on her because, I mean, she won an Academy Award for it. And the Oscars don't give the Academy doesn't give Oscars to children very often. And when they do, it's something that you should really take notice of. And so this time I watched it from, with the specific intent to look at what was it that they saw in her. And oh my gosh, that kid really is amazing. She does scream a lot.
Right? Yeah.
But wow, the emotion that I talk about not being emotionally connected to the characters, but if there's one character that I do feel has really good emotional depth, it's actually Anna Paquin's character. She does such a great job with that performance, and to get that from a kid who's only 10, I mean, that's great on her, but it's also really good work with Jane Campion to draw that kind of a performance from a child.
And also, she is putting on a Scottish accent as well. She is not, in fact, Scottish. This is this kid. I think, is this her film debut? I think so.
Might have been.
One out, at least. But still, I mean, like, to get that kind of a performance, not only emotionally, but just physically, and the accent work, there's a lot going into it, I think. And I also think the character is really interesting just because of her relationship to her mother. Because I feel like it's not the closest mother-daughter relationship we have here. Because I think Ada sometimes gets kind of caught up in her own situation and her own longing for the piano and her love interests, that like Flora is usually outside of a house most of the time. Like she's freely playing and all over the place. And we don't really see a lot of intense intimacy. I mean, those scenes are there clearly, but it's not as much as you might think, which I found to be an interesting choice.
Well, they do have some beautiful scenes together, particularly like storytelling at night and that kind of thing. And clearly they do have some sort of a bond. What's interesting is that Flora is, generally speaking, Ada's connection to the world. She serves as her translator. And so from that sense, she really relies on her daughter in a lot of ways that a small child shouldn't have to necessarily be relied on. Also, at the same time, we don't ever really find out anything about Flora's father. And so I'm sure there's some sense, and you get hints of it, there's this sense of resentment that she's saddled with this kid all on her own, and now she's got a husband who theoretically should be taking care of them together, but he's really just this monster. And so in some ways Flora is her connection, but also her burden.
Right, exactly. Well put. Yeah, it's an interesting relationship, and I think Flora does act kind of selfishly in like a way that a child would naturally kind of would, especially in this situation. And when it gets to the point, of course, when Ada is wanting to communicate a message that her heart belongs to Baines, and she takes a piano key off and sends that to him for her to give to him. Flora does not end up giving it to him. She ends up giving it to Sam Neill's character because I think some part of Flora might just want a nice, a father figure and just a nice kind of situation again after all this craziness. So I think that's kind of how I interpreted everything from Flora's point of view.
Sure. I mean, she's
Yeah.
been uprooted from her home and shipped thousands of miles away to this island in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, I think that a kid, I mean, adults look for it too, but a kid is looking for somewhere to belong. And when she's never has had a father in her life. Probably the closest she came is her grandfather, who sold them. So,
Right.
I mean,
God. Yeah. It's really a lot of really interesting, weird little dynamics in this movie. But I just wanted to go back to Holly Hunter because I wanted to know, because I feel like a lot of the movie kind of hinges on her and her ability to communicate those emotions. Did you feel differently about her performance?
I feel that she's very cold. And that's where I struggle with this is really in her performance the most
Oh,
because
wow. Okay.
yeah, I think she's good, but I'm never sure if I'm not sure if she's intentionally like distanced and isolated or if it's just something about the way that Holly Hunter is playing the character. Like I've never really gotten a sense one way or the other
Interesting.
on that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
find her very cold, and is that intentional or is that
I mean, I think it's part of just the character itself being very restrained,
Mhm.
very not wanting to show her emotions. I don't know. I think even in like the sign language scenes where she's like aggressively talking about how she needs her piano, I think those are very expressive, emotional scenes that I connected to at least. But
Yeah. Yeah, and that's honestly that's the most emotion you ever really see from her is all related to the piano, which, I mean, the piano is the title character of the
it is the
movie.
titular role.
Exactly, and it plays so well.
Sure does.
Um, but that's the thing. Like, I mean, when she does sit down to the piano and like the only time that you really ever see her connect with anything meaningfully is with her and her piano.
Mm-hmm.
And those scenes are beautiful. And the fact that that's actually Holly Hunter playing
Yeah, how about that?
is yeah, it's really lovely.
Mm-hmm.
And this sign language, I was actually reading an interesting article the other day about the ASL teacher that she worked with, and the two of them together basically developed Ada's signs, and it was really fascinating. Yeah. I mean it's adapted from like British and ASL and some other ones. I think Russian was thrown in there and some other sign language, combinations because sign language wasn't commonly utilized in the 1800s still.
Yeah,
It
right.
was starting to be like Gallaudet, I think University was founded somewhere in there, but that's still thousands of miles away from where she is. So, I mean, it's starting to be a thing, but really anybody who's communicating with sign language, they're kind of developing their own system anyway. And so it's actually really cool that Campion let Hunter kind of go off and figure that out. So,
Yeah, that is really cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
yeah.
I actually wanted to talk about something that not a lot of reviews that I've seen have really even talked about, even though it's somewhat relevant to the movie in places, but just the juxtaposing of the scenes with the Maori people.
Mhm.
Yeah, like whenever I would read any review of this movie, they just were not even mentioned really at all.
Kind of
Um,
ironic that no one talks about the disenfranchised community
yeah,
of people.
yeah, and there's a lot of scenes kind of peppered in throughout where we get to get a little look into their community. Did you take to any of these scenes, or did you find them distracting, or did you not appreciate the execution or anything?
So not personally knowing a lot about the Maori people or the Maori culture, I wasn't really sure how to read those scenes. I don't know if that's a fair representation or not. I actually enjoy some of that. I like seeing that look and that community. It's the only real time that you see any sort of a community is in those scenes.
Good
because
point.
otherwise it's Ada and Alistair and Flora just kind of being mad at each other.
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting because Jane Campion, of course, is from New Zealand.
Right.
And so this is something, the fact that she made a point to show these scenes, I think is pretty significant. I wish that I personally knew more about how well the culture was being represented.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I did appreciate seeing a different type of culture that clearly is not seen much in certainly US cinema. But I don't know. I think at times I felt like I'm not really sure how this is supposed to be relevant to everything that's happening. But I think there is still kind of this putting them in dichotomy against each other of these very Victorian people who want things to still be prim and proper, even though they live in not ideal conditions, at least for them. And juxtaposing that with the Maori people who have their own customs and cultures and things that they deal with. I mean, Campion did say that she wanted to actually just display this culture to the world intentionally. Um, I'm not sure if they totally integrate well enough with everything that's happening, but I do appreciate it just from a visual standpoint and just culturally, at least.
Yeah, well, and one thing that we do get from those scenes is that we see how Baines has incorporated with them. He's an outsider,
right?
And he belongs. He's one of them. They welcome him in. He's part of their community, and so I think that that's important. As far as character development for him, because he's a lot like Ada. He's also an outsider,
exactly,
and he's found a way to belong.
Right. And going back to the relationship itself, I think that's part of what definitely draws the two of them together is that sense of outsiderness. And I think that is why she ultimately feels that connection with him because they're both kind of in touch with a very primal base need that they have, you know, and she is communicating everything through her music. That is her preferred way of communicating to the world, and he just kind of sits there and listens. So often he's very creepy while doing this, sitting and listening, but he is still there, you know, he's there, he's not saying much, he's listening. I don't know if she is like properly listening to her or if she's just like totally focused on her body while she's playing, but I think that is part of what, you know, that's part of why she ultimately gives in to him, because you juxtapose that with Alasdair, who from the jump already cuts off that line of communication by being like, no, the piano's too heavy, leave it on the beach. You know, and then even when the piano is back and in the Alasdair household, she's still kind of like, well, it's just not the same. So
yeah, well, and with him, I mean, he doesn't care about anything that doesn't belong to him.
Right.
So
yeah. And his like really awkward, very cringeworthy attempts at trying to get more invested in her is just so painful to watch. The ending, I wanted to talk about the ending because this is an ending that, from what I've read, is not exactly what Jane Campion might have intended ultimately. I don't know if you've read that as well, but just to set it up for everyone. So, well, spoiler for anyone who haven't seen it, you know, 25-year-old movie, but just, I guess it's...
Hey, you just saw it, so...
important. Exactly, yeah. So, right. It ends with the implication that Alasdair has just let Ada be free to be with Baines. And so she and Baines and Flora and some of the locals, they swim out with the piano also on board. And then it kind of becomes clear that the piano is weighing them down. And from what I can tell, after they decide to put it overboard, she lets herself get caught up in the rope so that she can sink to the bottom of the ocean with the piano. And then she kind of has a second guessing of herself, and she has the will to live essentially again. And so she swims up to the surface. And, from there, it's later revealed that she moves in with Baines, and now she's a piano teacher with a metal finger and is beginning to learn to speak. So this is not what Jane Campion might have intended, because there's this quote from a few years ago where she talks about how, actually, I'll just quote her. She says, "For freaking hell's sake, she should have stayed under there. It would have been more real, wouldn't it? It would be better. I didn't have the nerve at the time. What if Ada just went down? She went down with her piano. That's it." So what do you make of this ending and this hypothetical ending?
Yeah.
Would the hypothetical have made you even more mad?
I don't. Well, yeah, because I have a really hard time with moms deciding they have nothing to live for when their kid is right there.
Yeah, there's
looking
that.
at you, Padme Amidala. But but
wow. Shots fired.
But one thing I do want to just say really quickly, though, they don't just decide to throw the piano overboard. She insists. Like, she's screaming at them to throw it over. Well, not screaming because she doesn't talk. But, she's ordering
screaming in her own way. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To throw it overboard. And so that's when she steps into the rope and all that. It's funny because the ending feels very much like something that would have been done by another director that we'll probably be mentioning very soon. And it feels very much like that neat and tidy, perfect ending.
Yeah.
And everybody learns and everybody lives happily ever after. And that's not an ending that really feels earned by the story that we've been watching up till now. I mean, Alistair is such a hateful person that he chops off her finger.
Yes.
And makes her daughter take it to Baines. And like he wouldn't just be like, "Oh, all right, well, just go then. You don't love me, you never will."
After all that, yeah.
Like, he's not going to do that. He would have killed her. I mean, that's just a fact. He would have.
Yeah.
And so, but whatever, fine. They go off. They're, she decides to off herself, and then decides not to at the last second, manages to miraculously survive sinking to the bottom of the ocean.
With that big dress, too. Yeah.
Right, that giant dress, tied to a piano. So, the whole ending just feels very cheesy and unearned and very frustrating. And I think, honestly, that may be the biggest reason why I just never could connect to this movie, because it doesn't feel like it really tells the complete story in a satisfying way. I think that if she had ultimately died in the end, whether she killed herself or Alistair was the one to do it, then you have a tragic story.
Right. Yeah. Which I actually think watching the movie is kind of in keeping with the rest of it in a way. It feels like it's kind of heading towards that sort of a tragic ending.
Yeah.
So when that does happen, I was even thinking at the time, like, is this what was actually intended? It reminded me of the Fatal Attraction thing and that whole story, where the Fatal Attraction was initially supposed to kind of end with Glenn Close's character offing herself, essentially, and having it be a very tragic story, which felt earned for that character and that story.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And test audiences hated it because they wanted to see Glenn Close die and have it be done, and have it be done by the wife. And so they had to film an alternate ending. They actually had to go back and film that ending, which Glenn Close was very resistant to because she felt very attached to the character and she didn't feel like that was a rightful way to conclude her character. But that's that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, yeah. I mean, Yeah, it's kind of similar to that then.
Yeah.
I think this ending just isn't satisfying after the film that you've been watching.
Yeah. I think maybe if there had been a little more of that, kind of like you were saying, more trending for Alistair towards that positivity of wanting to just let her go rather than have it go from him literally chopping off her finger and having it delivered to just kind of a scene where he feels like he understands her in her mind and she's communicating to him, and then that all kind of makes him change a little bit. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of like a little bit clunky by the end, and
Right.
so that's probably where the ending is kind of.
Yeah, well, he spends the whole movie feeling like being just such a selfish person.
Mm.
And you never, like, at least for me, and maybe other people interpret it differently, but the way that I watch it, he's very selfish throughout. And I never really got the sense that he loved Ada. I think he just wanted her to love him, which
Mm-hmm.
is a very different thing. And so, yeah, so for him to just decide to give her what she wants in the end, it didn't fit in with the character that I had spent the last 2 hours getting to know.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I still just appreciate it just because it's a nice sort of ending to kind of, I feel like if it had ended in that way, I don't know if that would have been a completely satisfying experience of her just drowning in the ocean after all
I
this
am
time, but I don't know.
I am glad that Flora didn't have to be an orphan.
Yes.
So
So
there's that.
let's celebrate that.
Yes.
And also, watching it through 2018 eyes, I just wanted to note that I saw a lot of interesting little parallels with The Shape of Water. Just saying. You know?
Maybe one or two.
Yeah. Just like on the surface, I mean. Not like, not much thematically, but just interesting little, obviously, the character being mute and her having different ways of communicating with people and also having it be in the ocean at the whatever.
Yeah.
Regardless. The piano. A very interesting experience. I think what I appreciate the most about it is that it is very evocative and poetic, and the imagery I think really sticks in my mind more so than the storyline itself. And I tend to appreciate those kinds of movies and TV shows. And so I appreciate it for that. I love Holly Hunter. I love Anna Paquin. And I'm very glad that they won Oscars for this, honestly. I think
Yeah.
these were great performances to win with for their careers. And so I think it's very much worth your watch, even if you might be mixed on it. I think either way, you're going to have some sort of reaction from this movie, I think. And so there's something about that that I think is valuable.
Yeah, well, it's historically significant regardless.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, yeah, you have only the second woman ever nominated for Best Director.
Yeah.
Or third. Wait, I
Second.
can't remember now.
Second.
Second, yeah.
Yeah.
Nominated for Best Director. So that right there was a huge feat. That's something to celebrate. And then the movie gets nominated for 8 Oscars overall. It's just there's a lot to celebrate about it, even if the story doesn't necessarily stick for you like it didn't for me. So
yeah,
you, the listeners, not you, Kevin.
Great, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And also, while we wrap up this discussion, I just wanted to note that this will sadly be the last time we talk about a female director being in a runner-up movie.
Yeah.
Because, as I said kind of from the jump, this is the first time that a woman has been nominated for picture and director together. And so there's not going to be any in the past. So here we are. And I also think it's noteworthy that, you're on this show, you're on Little Miss Sunshine, which also had a female director. So
that was such a happy coincidence. I really didn't even plan it that way.
And also they both have child performances.
Hey, look at that. With girls.
I know. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, when we come back, we will be talking about why The Piano lost Best Picture to a gigantic movie called Schindler's List.
Never heard of it.
Lift your skirt. Lift it higher. Higher. Lift it higher.
And we're back. So now we're going to talk about why The Piano lost Best Picture to Schindler's List. First, the movie received 8 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director for Jane Campion, Best Actress for Holly Hunter, Best Supporting Actress for Anna Paquin, Best Original Screenplay for Jane Campion, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design, and Best Film Editing. And it walked away with 3 of those. 3 of those were also above the line categories, which is significant, for Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Original Screenplay. So that's pretty cool. Before the Oscars, The Piano had only won the WGA for Original Screenplay, and that's because Schindler's List swept the entire race. Otherwise, it won the Golden Globe. Eventually, it won the BAFTA, which was after the Oscars. It won PGA, it won DGA, it won the WGA for Adapted. So it won every place that it could have. And I will also note right off the jump here that we no longer have SAG. So now we're without that major precursor. So things will become even more unpredictable from there. But yes.
Yeah, it would have been very interesting to see what SAG would have done in this particular year.
I know, because I don't know if Schindler's List is like a ensemble SAG winner. I mean, it probably would have just swept through with everything else, but I don't know.
I think there are some other contenders that might have been in play. So
yeah. So let's talk about this race. As I mentioned, Schindler's List pretty much dominated this race. So, I mean, we could talk about how this really felt like it was Steven Spielberg's time, right? Like, this was his time.
Yeah, well, it's actually, again, it's really funny that I was on the Little Miss Sunshine episode because it's very similar thing. Like, it was time for Martin Scorsese to win, and he had the right movie. And in this case, it was, it was definitely time for Spielberg to win. And this was an amazing movie for him to win with. I mean,
this was not like a career Oscar thing. This was good,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Schindler's List, I would say, is one of the greatest Best Picture winners of my lifetime for sure.
Absolutely.
And I would say top 10 of all time, easily, maybe top 5. It's such an astounding work of art on so many levels. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot to celebrate with it.
For sure. And I was looking, through these past 25 years that I've talked about, and I feel like looking at Schindler's List, that is probably the movie of the last 25 years that people will quibble the least with it winning Best Picture. Because I feel like every single other year there's always people saying, oh, this other film should have won, this film was snubbed. I feel like this 1993 is the Schindler's List year.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because I actually went on Rotten Tomatoes because I was like, I was curious what the score would be.
Yes.
And I'm pulling it up again because I don't remember the exact number. It was not 100%. And I was like, who the hell rates Schindler's List rotten?
How dare you, sir or madam?
Like, I don't even know how you could think that way unless you're like, Ahmadinejad or something, but yeah, it has a 97% on
not even like
Rotten
99
Tomatoes.
or 98.
No, 97. It has 88 fresh ratings and 3 rotten ones. So 3 people
Oh my god.
said it's rotten, and I don't even want to know those people.
No. Well, I remember reading that Michael Haneke had issues with Schindler's List. So, but that's probably not a surprise.
Yeah.
But yes, Schindler's List, I mean, in addition to being a phenomenal experience as a movie, it is historically important. It is epic. It is sweeping. It tells an amazing, not amazing in a positive way, but just an incredible story of humanity. And, despite, I think, the difficulty of Schindler's List, because it's a very hard movie to watch at times, I feel like it's also a lot easier for people to sit anyone down in front of and have them understand, like, this is a great movie.
Yeah. It's okay. Here's a confession. I have seen this once.
Ooh, wow.
I've never gone back and watched it again because it was such an emotionally devastating experience. I mean, all the emotion I didn't feel with the piano was sucked up by Schindler's List because that movie gutted me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just never been able to sit down and watch it again because I know what I'm in for when I do.
Yeah, exactly.
And I planned on watching it again in preparation for this episode, but I
just couldn't bring yourself to
couldn't do it. I was just like, oh, I'll do it later. And then all of a sudden we're recording and I'm like, oh, shoot,
yeah.
I never did. But
plus it's like over 3 hours, so.
It is. But the thing is, it's one of those films that you can sit down and dedicate 3+ hours to it and not feel like it's a slog to get through.
Absolutely.
It's just so beautifully assembled, so beautifully crafted. Everything about it comes together so perfectly. The performances are devastating and perfect. And there are sequences, even though I saw it once 25 years ago, there are still moments from that film that have just stood out to me that I have actually thought about many times over the years. One of the biggest ones is when Oscar Schindler pulls up, parks his car and he gets out and there's something in the air, like he's ash in the air and he's not really sure what it is, and he goes and he scoops some of it up off of the fender of his car and he looks at it and he looks up at the chimney and he realizes what it is. And oh my gosh, that just it kills me just to even think about it. So
yeah, and I actually just rewatched it for this was my second viewing, and it's I mean, it's still so impactful 25 years later. I mean, it ages perfectly. Like, this is a movie that will absolutely stand the test of time. And so, I mean, from even the technical elements, the use of black and white, I think, makes it really striking. Lots of fascinating shadows happening in this movie. And the music, obviously, is just, like, so mournful. And the performances, like you said, when Liam Neeson and Ralph Fiennes juxtaposing these two men against each other, which is done throughout the movie. I mean, Ralph Fiennes, he does not win an Oscar for this performance, and I think that is a robbery.
That's one that I have not gotten over. I'm still so upset about it. He should have won. He should have won for that. And honestly, as much as I love Tom Hanks, and we'll talk about his movie in a minute too, but I would have given it to Liam Neeson.
Yeah, just a big sweep. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is odd to me that sometimes with these big sweeps that we see at the Oscars, like, usually the categories it doesn't win are acting. Like,
Yeah.
it's usually all the technicals, the director, sometimes even screenplay and best picture, and then like the actors kind of just get ignored.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It feels like the actors get swept up in it because people love the overall film so much, but a lot of times those tend to be films that are technical marvels, like Titanic.
Yeah.
Or Lord of the Rings. There's so much about them that stands out in addition to or besides the acting that
Right.
it's easy to say, well, yeah, this film is already getting so much praise and attention. Let's reward some of the other films for their performances. But
Yeah.
then you get Tommy Lee Jones beating Ralph Fiennes.
Yeah, and you look at that and you're like, how?
It kills me. I love Tommy Lee Jones in that movie, but
Yeah,
come
he's very
on,
fun,
people.
you know, but okay.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, even someone like Pete Postlethwaite and then In the Name of the Father, I think I would understand that a little more than Tommy Lee Jones.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But regardless, that category also has Leonardo DiCaprio. Just throwing that out there for his What's Eating Gilbert Grape, little kid.
Yeah. Which he was very good, and it's actually, I would say it's a very deserved nomination.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I would also have been upset if he had beaten Ray
Well, yes. That would have been just an entirely different narrative of history if Leonardo DiCaprio wins on his first nomination.
Yeah.
Anyway. So, yeah, and to juxtapose this with the piano and why the piano lost. First of all, you know, it did win the Palme d'Or at Cannes, first female director to do so. And I believe, am I right in saying it's still the only one?
I believe that is still correct.
Yeah. So that's not great, but obviously great for her. The movie had a lot of buzz from that. It was a huge critical favorite. Looking at the critic awards for the year, obviously Schindler's List won pretty much, I think, every single best picture at every critic's circle. So, but also at the same time, Holly Hunter won pretty much every single best actress. So it's kind of an interesting pair of sweeps we have here. But when it comes to best picture for the piano, I think, as we have clearly outlined in our initial discussion, it is very polarizing. You know, I think certain people get a lot out of it. Certain people just don't really vibe with it at all. Plus, you know, there is just the factor of it being a very female-centered movie. You know, that tends to not be valued as much in Best Picture, especially in the 90s.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember very distinctly when Jane Campion was nominated, and that was a huge deal, obviously. And everyone was just like, oh, good. Now this is a breakthrough for women. We're going to start seeing more women nominated. And we still had to wait several more years for that to happen. And only 3 more have been in the meantime. And it's just like,
yeah.
She never would have won ever. I mean, just the fact that she got nominated, it really is one of those situations. It is an honor to be nominated. Even if you take Spielberg and Schindler's List out of the equation, she probably would not have won. Yeah. But it's a very deserving nomination.
Right.
Not a token. That's one thing that people need to understand. It's not exactly a token nomination.
Yeah. Because, like, you know, it was a big critic favorite. I actually kind of do. I don't know. I'm looking at the director race now, and I'm wondering who might have won if Schindler's List hadn't have happened. I mean, we have James Ivory, who finally won an Oscar this year for Call Me by Your Name, who did The Remains of the Day. And we have Jim Sheridan for In the Name of the Father, and then Robert Altman, who gets a lone Best Director nomination for Shortcuts, the only nomination for Shortcuts.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see who got in if it was not for Schindler's List. Like, if you took that out, if that didn't come out in 93, what takes its place, assuming everything else did? I think the surprising miss of that year was Philadelphia.
Yes.
And then I think you have a play for Jonathan Demme.
Exactly.
So...
yeah, either Jonathan Demme, maybe, I don't know, maybe Martin Scorsese for The Age of Innocence, who knows?
Possibly.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is a pretty open and shut case, ultimately, why Schindler's List won, why the piano lost. But both really fascinating movies to examine. But I did want to get to a few other Best Picture nominees in the race. Since we talked a little bit about Tommy Lee Jones, I think why not just delve into The Fugitive? Because this is quite an interesting little nomination because this is a movie that is based on a TV show, The Fugitive, and it is kind of a, dare I say, popular choice, a populist choice. It was a big, big, big box office hit. And, I think if you were to look at the movie, you would say it gears more towards entertaining crowds than it is for artistically enlightening you. So it's a little bit of a apple and a barrel of oranges here, as I say pretty much every every year. There's always one that's a little bit like, that's an interesting, inspired choice. What do you think of The Fugitive?
Oh, I love The Fugitive. I mean, it's the third highest grossing film of the year. It was definitely a crowd pleaser. It was a lot of fun to watch. You've got Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones, which were such a great pair of antagonists, and like just watching the two of them go against each other was so much fun. It is really weird to me that this made it into the lineup instead of some other options. So I don't know what happened there. I kind of wonder if some other things just split enough of the votes that The Fugitive just kind of came out of nowhere. It's such a strange inclusion.
Yeah, I think it might have been a situation of the movie kind of, I mean, this always happens when we have remakes of something, and then when a remake or a reboot, whatever you want to call this, adaptation, I guess, of something else is actually really good, I think people tend to really just get excited about it and kind of pull for it as this underdog type of thing. And I guess there was just, a lot of support for it.
Yeah, well, and in the 90s, you did see a lot of popular films. It wasn't, I mean, you've got a mostly very traditional lineup here with the other four.
Right.
And then you've got this outlier thrown in, which was not uncommon. So, I mean, that's how you end up getting nominations like Marissa Tomei for My Cousin Vinny and, things like that. Like, there are just always some interesting nominations that make it in. So it's kind of fun, but it's still just a little bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, for sure. I actually do love The Fugitive as well. It's so much fun to watch. I mean, it's like watching it again now is like, you can, like, the 90s music is a little bit dated and stuff, but some of the effects are like, okay, this is clearly a 90s film, but still it's a very enjoyable experience.
Oh yeah, and that super like gift moment. I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. Like, they played that on a loop during Oscar season, and like I saw that trailer so many times, and yeah, it's such a great moment, and I think that really just was one that people were like, yeah, I love this movie. So
yeah, like, why not?
Yeah.
Get in there. And I mean, like you kind of suggested, I think it's pretty well written and very well adapted to the screen, and I wouldn't have minded an adapted screenplay nomination. It did not get that. It did not get directing or writing, so
yeah, which is why it's so weird that it managed to get into the Best Picture lineup, and it really makes me wonder how that happened. But I agree. I mean, it's a very well constructed thriller. It's well written. It's not cheesy or silly. I mean, some parts of it maybe, but only in that lovely 90s way,
Right, exactly.
But
yeah, and it does actually end up getting 7 nominations, so a lot of craft nominations for The Fugitive. And that also is the case with all of the movies nominated for Best Picture. Sometimes we get one where it's like Four Weddings and a Funeral, where it only gets one other nomination. This year, all of these movies got at least 7 nominations.
True.
So it was like, these were the movies we liked this year. These were the top 5 very clearly.
Yeah, well, and it's good to see that. It's good to see you didn't just like, it's always strange to me when something gets into Best Picture that they didn't put it in any other categories or maybe just one or two. It's like, why do you think this is the best if you didn't think anything else about it was the best?
Yeah, like Selma. Like, we only like the song, but also it's Best Picture.
Yeah, that should have gotten like 10 nominations.
No, I agree. It's just like it's a weird like mixed message when that happens.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I noticed on watching all of these movies basically in a row this week that there's a lot of weird little similarities and intersecting things happening with these movies, because In the Name of the Father also deals with a character who is falsely accused.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and obviously starring the wonderful Daniel Day-Lewis in a very I don't know, I guess you could say just more regular kind of performance from him. You know, it's not one of these things where he's putting on airs or totally transforming himself in any way. He's just being this Irish guy.
Yeah, he's a man. He's not a character. He's just a man. And it's actually kind of funny, but it's actually my favorite performance of it.
Wow. That feels like I feel like I understand what you're saying with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, he's fantastic in this role. I think he's very strangely watchable, and I mean, this is a movie that takes place over like 15 years, I think. And he manages to kind of make that transition work for him in a weird way. And what else? Like I said, I loved Pete Postlethwaite in this movie. Really soulful performance from him. The two of them are obviously father and son, and they're imprisoned together falsely, and both really good. Emma Thompson also gets a nomination here. Okay, sure.
Yeah, that felt more like she just kind of got pulled in with them. It's interesting to me that she got in for it, but
yeah, she's just a lawyer who shows up in the last 45 minutes to help, acquit them.
Yeah.
I mean, she's good. She has a nice little rousing speech in the court, so I guess that is probably what did it. But
yeah, and I mean, when you look at what else was nominated, it's like, I mean, I think they were kind of looking for that kind of performance.
Yeah, for sure. And right, The Remains of the Day. Yeah.
For which Emma Thompson was also nominated.
Yes. Yes. Actually, let's talk about this. Holly Hunter and Emma Thompson, double nominations for both of them, which has never happened before and hasn't happened since, for two actors to be double nominated in the same categories.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of insane. We're just, as a nation, we were just very taken by these two people. But Holly Hunter for The Firm, that's not entirely a beloved performance even by her, which she has openly admitted.
Yeah, that really I don't understand.
Yeah.
I love The Firm, obviously, because my feelings about a certain Mr. Cruz.
Yes, we all know. Yes.
But yeah, the fact that she's the representation of that film, it's like, what? Hold on, no.
Just, residual piano love, I'm guessing, but
probably, yeah.
But as for The Remains of the Day, that is actually a book that I read quite a while ago. From Kazuo Ishiguro. And that is a book that I did not understand how they could adapt it, because so much of it is just in the head of Mr. Stevens, Anthony Hopkins. And I was like, how are they possibly going to communicate this through film? Because
I've never read the book.
It's so beautiful. I mean, I imagine it's frustrating for some people because of the way that things kind of end. It's a story about longing and, not necessarily taking that chance on expressing your feelings towards someone. And by the end, it kind of doesn't end with them getting together. So it's like maybe unsatisfying to some people, but the way it's presented in the book, and I think it's done really well in the movie too, I think it earns that ending.
Yeah, well, you don't always have to have a story where everything wraps up neat and tidy. Kind of my complaint with the piano too. It can work to have this sad ending that doesn't feel fully, wonderful
Right.
and perfect. And as long as it matches with the story that you've had up to that point,
Yes,
it works really well.
which it absolutely does, because the entire point of the book and the movie is that sense of restraining your feelings and having this sense of English sort of dignity that eventually goes out of style, but he just remains for the rest of his life just this sense of like, this is my role in life, and if I act on these feelings, everything could be put into jeopardy. So
Yeah. Yep. It wouldn't have been true to the character for him
exactly.
to change. So
Right. And it gets 8 nominations and it doesn't win a single one of them, which is sad. But same thing goes for In the Name of the Father, which gets 7 and no wins. But that's also obviously because Schindler's List and The Piano and another Steven Spielberg movie, Jurassic Park, get the lion's share of awards here. So
yeah, if you want to talk about Steven Spielberg, and if anybody doesn't think that he is some kind of wizard, he did Schindler's List and Jurassic Park in the same year.
It blows my mind, honestly.
It's not possible. Like, no one else could do that, I don't think. So
yeah, I mean, it's insane. I'm speechless at even thinking about taking on these two vastly different epic projects almost concurrently with each other. It's just like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that while Schindler's List was being finished and everything, that's when they were doing a lot of the visual work for Jurassic Park, and that was very hands-off for him. So I mean, that's the only way that this could have worked. But not only did he have 2 good films in one year, he had 2 amazing films, 2 of his career best films, both come out in the same year. So I mean, it's staggering. So.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that again, honestly.
Definitely not from him.
Well, not from him, yeah, but although he did have War of the Worlds in Munich in one year, so
yes,
there was that. Significantly less impactful in both of those cases than
not quite the same, but both still very good.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so like we said, really interesting Best Picture lineup. Honestly, I really kind of love, or at least passionately like, all of these movies. So I don't often get that, so I appreciate it. I know you weren't as obviously passionate about The Piano, but I mean, you have to admit this is just a really great lineup that a lot of them really do stand the test of time.
Oh yeah, like, I mean, even though I don't love The Piano, I am very glad that it was nominated. I'm glad to see it in this collection. So
yeah. Before we move on to the should have been a contender segment, I wanted to get to one question that someone asked on Twitter for this, and that was about Schindler's List. And this is from Ronnie Castle, and he says, why did Ben Kingsley not get a nomination for Schindler's List?
That is a question I will never be able to answer, because he should have.
I agree. Yeah, like, watching this movie again, I was like, he's a lot more impactful than I remembered him being the first time. I mean, he's also a really fascinating character, and I think we recognize that the Academy sometimes gravitates more towards characters that they find interesting more than they do actual like performances sometimes. But I think that's a really interesting character, and
it's true. I think that I mean, I kind of wonder if a big reason is just that Ralph Fiennes definitely was a much more kind of in your face character and performance than Ben Kingsley, which is more understated.
Yeah.
And I think that there was probably a resistance to nominate both. And so if you're going to only nominate one, you're going to lean toward Ralph Fiennes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I suspect that's probably what was behind that. But Ben Kingsley definitely should have been there too. They should have both been nominated.
Yeah, and obviously he already does have an Oscar for Gandhi at this point, but still, I mean, I really do think that would have been a great nomination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let's move on to our should have been a contender segment, which is other movies nominated for Oscars but not necessarily Best Picture, or movies completely ignored by the Academy. So we were talking before this about how 1993 is a fantastic year. So let's get into all of these other movies that we think are great. Karen, you first.
Oh my gosh. Oh man. There are so many. Like, I actually started making a list of movies that I just love that, like, honestly, I think that it's really strange that Philadelphia was not nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah. I agree.
I mean, it gets nominated for Best
5.
Actor.
Yeah.
Did it get 5 overall?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and it's such a good movie, and Jonathan Demme was someone that people respected, and
Right.
so
This
the
is
fact
right after
that
Silence of the Lambs.
exactly. So, that little movie that, won Best Picture 2 years before.
Just
And so
swept the top 5 categories. Yeah.
exactly. And so it's very strange to me, especially that they're going to reward Tom Hanks over Liam Neeson. But Philadelphia doesn't even make it into the lineup. It's and also Jonathan Demme doesn't make it in for director. So it's a very strange little fact. And I know we'll talk about the expanded lineup, but I don't know how this wouldn't have been in if there were more contenders.
I think this is absolutely the 6th place movie, and there's no other argument for any other movie. Even The Age of Innocence, I think Philadelphia just hit. It hit actor and it won actor and best song for Bruce Springsteen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it really captured a really important, obviously very important social message of the AIDS crisis. And it is a movie that I think a lot of straight people, frankly, saw and maybe thought about their perception of gay people in general. And I think I will always value that movie for that. I mean, I think it's a very palatable movie for, straight people. It doesn't show a lot of intimacy, between gay men. And sometimes people mention that it is slightly sanitized in that way. But regardless, I think it absolutely serves its purpose.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, this was a huge moment.
Mm-hmm.
This film really was monumental for those reasons that you're talking about, because you're coming off of, I remember in the 80s, I remember some of the TV shows I watched having very special episodes about how, like, making sure to teach children that you can't catch AIDS from, like, being in the same room with a gay person. And, and so it was like they were trying to still teach people that it's okay, that, like, gay people exist and there's nothing wrong with them. They're good people. They're normal. They walk among us,
Yeah.
And so Philadelphia was a very important bridge into acceptance, I think.
Absolutely.
And like, I mean, I know for me, I was in high school in 1993. And so I know for me, seeing that and seeing things that I hadn't seen depicted on screen. I'd never seen a homosexual relationship depicted on screen before, and I had rarely seen them in real life either. Right. And to see that, I mean, there's nothing weird about it.
Yeah, there's nothing different. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, that was very important. And yes, it is sanitized, but I think that it's because you're in this transition. And
yeah, exactly.
And as films, progressed through the next 25 years, you start to see more and more as people are getting used to this idea. Yeah. And it started, I think, really with Philadelphia. So
it definitely did. And we actually got a few questions about Philadelphia. A lot of people wanted to know how this exactly happened, because Pete Shoulda asked, did homophobia prevent Philadelphia from getting a Best Picture nod?
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we know that the Oscars haven't always had the best relationship in that regard. But I don't really know because I feel like the movie that it would have replaced is The Fugitive. Maybe In the Name of the Father, I'm not sure. Um,
Probably The Fugitive.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I remember the buzz about Philadelphia, and I remember it being generally very positive. I mean, and obviously it gets 5 Oscars, it wins 1, or it gets 5 nominations, it wins 1.
Wins 2.
2, sorry,
Right.
in the lead role.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm sure that definitely played a hand in some of the people who chose not to vote for it, because of course it has to get a certain percentage of the vote.
Yeah.
In order to make it into the 5. I mean, this would have been a perfect opportunity for the Academy to say, look, we're not homophobic, and I don't know why they didn't take that opportunity. Maybe it was homophobia. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, we saw their Brokeback Mountain comments, so I mean,
very true. But that's
sure.
The thing is, like, they could have, made themselves, look good by nominating it, and then they didn't have to vote for it. I mean, nothing was going to beat Schindler's List anyway. So.
Right. Yeah. And also, Josh Parham asked, do you think Denzel Washington in Philadelphia is lead or supporting?
Oh, this is a question that we debate a lot.
I know.
I personally think that he is a lead. I think that he and Tom Hanks are co-leads.
I agree. I think they're leads. And I don't actually know if he was being campaigned for supporting or lead, because he didn't really get anything else, any other nominations from what I saw.
No, he was very overlooked for this. So, which is weird, because I mean, people already loved him. He'd already won an Oscar at this point, but
it's like a very prominent role too,
It is, yeah. Over at AwardsCircuit, we actually have kind of talked about what's the definition of lead versus supporting. Like, how do you make that distinction? And we've had a couple of different kind of things that we talk about. Clayton, the editor, his definition is when you describe what the movie's about, who are the people that you talk about? Those are your leads.
Right.
And which I think is pretty good. To me, it's a little bit more than that too. To me, it's which characters have the arc, which characters do you spend time with in their point of view.
Right.
So, and you definitely get that with Denzel and with Tom, both of them. So yeah, to me, they're absolutely co-leads. It's not even a question.
Yeah. They have like almost equal screen time from what I see, I mean, we do see a lot of scenes just of Denzel Washington on his own. So,
yeah.
Co-leads. Let's see. Well, actually, this kind of sort of a little bit relates, because Andrew Carden asked an interesting question about another interesting movie, Mrs. Doubtfire.
Okay.
So, he said, did Robin Williams deserve a nomination for Mrs. Doubtfire? If so, who would you boot among the Best Actor nominees?
Ooh. I would say that he did deserve a nomination.
Yeah. I haven't seen Mrs. Doubtfire in a long time, but I mean, it's still obviously iconic.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's funny to watch it again with 2018 eyes.
Well, yeah.
It does become a little problematic, but when you look at it from the innocent point of view of the 90s, and it's not intending to be offensive in any way, and it's actually all about someone who just really loves his kids and wants to be with them.
Yeah.
It takes the sting of the problems out of it. But I don't know who I would eliminate, honestly. I mean, it's
yeah, that's a really great lineup, honestly.
It is. I mean, maybe Anthony Hopkins, but I don't know.
I love him
hard.
in that movie.
I know, I do too. But it's like, how do you take out Lawrence Fishburne? Because he's so great as Ike Turner, and I don't know. They just need to have 6 nominees that year.
Clearly, yeah. Yes, just do what the Emmys do. That's what they've been doing lately. They're just like 8 nominees. Why not?
Yep. We'll just keep counting until you all stop voting. So
exactly, yeah. But I think Robin Williams wins the Golden Globe for comedy, and so does the movie, I think. So
probably.
Yeah. So I would imagine he was close, but unfortunately is another one of these comedic types of performances that does not ultimately get a nomination.
It's true.
Yeah. I love Mrs. Doubtfire. I love Philadelphia. I just wanted to mention a few kid-friendly movies from this year that I still love and definitely was a big part of my life growing up, and like me and my friends, which was Hocus Pocus and The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Love The Nightmare Before Christmas. It's such a good movie.
Yeah. First off, Hocus Pocus is just so campy and absurd and probably not a good movie, but at the same time, who cares? Like, it's Bette Midler and Kathy Najimy and Sarah Jessica Parker just being witches, being fabulous. And it's just a cult classic for me and a lot of people I know, so I have to throw it in there.
And you know what? You just go ahead and love it. That is great for you.
Thank you. Just let me have
it's really funny because every year at Halloween this movie comes up, and every year people give me crap because I don't love it. And
wow.
You know, if it brings you joy, good. I'm glad. I don't have any ill will toward it. It's just not my favorite.
Okay.
At all.
So. Well, there's also The Nightmare Before Christmas.
And that one I love. So.
Yeah. Just a really amazing animation style that I am obsessed with.
Mm-hmm.
And the stop motion and the characters, so unique. I love the music, the songs. I wish one of these songs was nominated for original song, honestly, because I love the soundtrack.
I can't believe none of them are. It's so strange.
This is Halloween. Hello, that's amazing.
Yeah, like how does that not get in there? But I love I just love everything about it. It's such an inventive story. It's so fun and clever, and you know, I remember watching Fractured Fairy Tales when I was younger, and it's a little bit of that where you just have like you know, in this case you have these holiday people that don't belong together and trying to figure out Christmas, and it's this just fun, delightful, charming story. And again, it's kind of this underlying message of learning to accept things that are different and learning to appreciate other cultures.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Two favorites of mine. Did you have any other big ones for you?
I love. Are we talking just in general?
Literally any movie that came out in 1993.
Oh my gosh. I have a few more. I love Sleepless in Seattle.
Oh my god, I was just gonna say that for mine.
Oh my gosh, I love that movie so much. I remember my brother bought me the VHS for Christmas, and I think I watched it every day for like 2 months straight. Oh yeah, I love that movie so much. It's just so funny, and Rosie O'Donnell has a line in that movie that just resonated with me, and like still to this day has, where she says, "You don't want to be in love, you want to be in love in a movie." And I'm like, that is me. Romantic comedies ruined me. Rosie O'Donnell nailed it. So yeah, I love that one. Again, Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. Big year for Tom Hanks. Yeah,
it was a big year for Tom Hanks. It was a big year for Sam Neill.
Yeah.
Holly Hunter. I mean,
Emma Thompson. Yeah.
So,
a lot of people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another one that I love is Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see Dave?
I did not.
Oh my gosh, that is such a great movie. It's so good, and I kind of wish that it would happen now. Kevin Kline plays this guy who makes his money as a presidential lookalike. Mm-hmm. And then the president has a stroke and is incapacitated, and they don't want the vice president to take over. So they swap out Dave to pretend to be the president, and he starts making all these like good decisions and running the country really well with no experience. And everyone loves him, and it's so great.
Yeah, might be something to think about.
Yeah, you know, some movies maintain their relevance 25 years later.
Clearly.
In ways that you don't expect.
Exactly. Yeah, that honestly sounds really fun. And
it is. It's so fun. There is a scene where he's meeting with the cabinet that is like one of the best scenes in any political movie ever, because he's trying to bring down the budget a little bit on a couple of different things so that he can save this children's home. And the conversation that he has with the Secretary of, I think, Commerce is just gold. So go watch it. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Just watch it. And enjoy.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
There's one other big one that we haven't really talked about.
And
Jurassic Park.
Yes. We did reference it a little bit, but yeah, I mean, Jurassic Park, hello. It is the movie of 93.
Oh, yeah.
Number 1 at the box office. Yep.
By a long shot.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's, again, I'm going to use that word again, iconic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's one of the best action movies. It's so fun, so adventurous, especially watching it as a kid, as I did, was just like a dream.
Yeah.
Laura Dern.
She's so great. I love her. I love Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum, of course, yeah. I mean,
yeah, everything about that movie is just so great. And this is the thing, when I watched Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom this summer, I walked out of the theater really frustrated and mad because I just thought, how can you watch this and think back to Jurassic Park and go, yeah, this is what Michael Crichton had in mind for his series. This is where he wanted to go with this. It's like, no. Jurassic Park is a blockbuster that is such a rare treat. I mean, there are a lot of blockbusters that I love, but it's such a well-developed story from start to finish. You have characters that you get to really know and care about as people, not just, oh, this guy's the hero, so I need him to survive. It's you learn, you get to know for 45 minutes before anything starts to happen. You get to know about Dr. Grant. You get to know about Dr. Sadler and all these other people, and to really care. I want Ellie to survive because I like Ellie, Right. I want them to get away. You're so relieved when Ian turns out not to be dead, because you like him, you like them all. And it's just so well constructed. The visual effects are amazing. They still hold up now.
Exactly.
I was talking to one of the visual effects designers from that movie recently, and he was telling me that when they were doing it, when they were trying to figure out how to make everything work, they were hoping that the effects would last for about 10 years before they really started to degrade. 25 years and they still look amazing. So
yeah. And I remember seeing someone do like a comparison shot of the effects from the 93 Jurassic Park compared to the new Jurassic World, and how differently they looked, and yet the 93 version felt so much more lifelike and real and scary, so
I think because they used a combination of the computer effects and practical. I mean, there's still some stuff where they used models and they used animatronics and things, so it's not fully CGI, which is what they rely on now, which is why it looks like CGI now.
Right, yeah. So let this movie honestly be an example for anyone making a blockbuster 25 years later. Because like you said, the character development in this is surprisingly really good and really does get you invested. So it's amazing. Yep. Everyone knows it's amazing. So it's not like this is groundbreaking information, but still, just watch it if you haven't in a while.
I adore the score so much. It's
oh
so
my
great.
God. Yeah. How could I forget the classic score? I mean,
oh yeah. And I mean, this is a case where I still think that Schindler's List would have won, but John Williams should have been a double nominee that year.
Yeah, that would have been incredibly deserved.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Jurassic Park is an all-time score. So
yeah. And is used, I think, sometimes in like montages at future Oscar.
Oh yeah, and as soon as you hear it, you know what movie it's from.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Do you think that with The Remains of the Day? No, you don't. Or The Firm?
No. Or... The Firm. I know. Like, really? Okay. Anyway, so the other one I just wanted to mention is What's Eating Gilbert Grape. We mentioned the Leonardo DiCaprio performance. I love Darlene Cates in that movie. Now the late Darlene Cates.
I know.
Such a a powerful performance from someone who did not act before this. Johnny Depp is fine, whatever. It's the 90s Johnny Depp heartthrob, classic kind of role for him, but just a really charming little story from Lasse Hallström, our old friend from the Cider House Rules. He's someone who I'm very hot and cold on, but for this movie, I kind of felt that sort of sentimental kind of emotion from this movie. It really affected me.
Oh yeah, I love it too. And it's funny because Johnny Depp is kind of, well, him as Gilbert, he's just kind of the character that's there while everything's happening around him. And
right.
I think
a little bit of
that's
a
why.
cipher.
Yeah, and I think that's why he works so well in the movie, and why it's okay that he's so not like the big showy characters like we come to know him for. And it's like, I mean, it's a great performance from Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a great performance from Juliette Lewis. Mary Steenburgen is so great. And John C. Reilly is in this too. And Crispin Glover as his two friends that are just hilarious to watch. And yeah, it's
damn. I'm like, give this one best ensemble.
Seriously, yeah, it's great, and I thoroughly enjoy that one. So, I'm trying to think. There are some other ones that I really liked too. Groundhog Day was a good one that year.
Of course.
Let's see. In the Line of Fire was a really popular one.
That might have been close to
I think it might have been.
Does get screenplay, acting.
Yeah. Oh, another one I love. Adam's Family Values.
Ooh, good one. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Another one of these kind of horror, the kid-friendly variety kind of that we were talking about.
And it's a sequel that is so well done. It doesn't feel like it's a sequel that was just made for the purpose of making more money. It's they waited until they had a good story. They got everyone back together, and then they brought in Joan Cusack, because why wouldn't you if you can?
Yes.
And it's so great. It's so fun. The production design of that is just amazing. Love that one.
And it rightfully does get that production design nomination. So that's always good. Yeah. This is an amazing year. Like, no question.
It really is. Yeah. Well, and this is why when we were talking about years, I was like, okay, I don't love The Piano, but I love the films of 1993. So
right. Yeah. I get it. Yeah, I definitely get it now.
Yep, it's a good year. Oh, we also had the Joy Luck Club that year too.
The Joy Luck Club, which is more or less in the news lately from Crazy Rich Asians.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, the Joy Luck Club is one that I enjoyed it. I had read the book for a high school assignment. It was like on my summer reading list or something. The movie is good. I don't know that it was necessarily one that would have been an awards player, or if it should have been, but it's definitely a significant one, especially when you look at the fact that a lot has been made of it with Crazy Rich Asians, because it's the last movie from a studio that had an Asian American lead cast members, and that's, I can't believe it's been 25 years. That's so ridiculous.
Years. Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So, but it was a good one. Definitely worth watching.
Yeah, just looking at how we keep saying that it's been 25 years for these things. It's like such a fascinating milestone for all of these elements, from Schindler's List to The Piano to that to Jurassic Park. I mean,
The Sandlot.
The Sandlot. Oh boy, yeah, of course.
Oh boy, what? I love that movie.
No, I just mean, like, I can't believe we forgot it.
Yeah. Oh, another one that will probably get in trouble from someone for not talking about is Rudy.
Yeah, Rudy. Okay, not one of my favorites, but that's fine.
Definitely also not an awards player, and it shouldn't have been.
Right.
But still an iconic movie that a lot of people enjoy. I enjoy it. I think it's a charming film.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily love it as much as other people, but it's charming.
Yeah. I'm just looking over the Oscar list to see any random little one or two nominations, like Beethoven's Second.
Oh my gosh, if that was, yeah.
Yeah. It's an original song nominee.
Oh, yeah, boy. That's another one. It's like, how does that get in and not This Is Halloween? Come
right. On. Yeah. Or what's this? What's this?
Right?
I won't get into it.
I think you already did.
Yeah, too late. And I guess, what's love got to do with it? We mentioned briefly before.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another one. Like, great performances.
Yeah.
I mean, really great performances. And I think that in a different year, Angela Bassett may have had a really good shot at that leading actress win. But I think that no one was going to beat Holly Hunter, honestly.
No. So. And this is still only Angela Bassett's only nomination, which is not
good. Criminal.
And I feel like Hollywood has failed her, and we have failed her. So,
yep,
that's sad. On that note, we are going to take our final break, and when we come back, we will be talking about whether we think Schindler's List deserved its Best Picture win, or if The Piano should have taken it.
The last Oscar is for Best Picture, and the nominees are The Fugitive, Arnold Kopelson, producer. In the Name of the Father, Jim Sheridan, producer. The Piano, Jan Chapman, producer. The Remains of the Day, Mike Nichols, John Calley, Ismail Merchant, producer. Schindler's List, Steven Spielberg, Gerald R. Molen, Branko Lustig, producers. And the Oscar for the Best Picture of 1993 goes to Schindler's List. Steven Spielberg, Gerald Molen, and Branko Lustig, producers.
And we're back. So now we'll be giving our verdict as to whether we think Schindler's List deserved to win Best Picture, or if maybe it should have been The Piano 25 years later. All right, Karen, what is your verdict?
I know this is going to shock a lot of no one, but Schindler's List should definitely have won Best Picture.
Period.
I have nothing more to say about it.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mic drop.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really like The Piano a lot, and I think it's definitely a unique film experience that I do appreciate, but Schindler's List is just beyond. I think it is an experience. It is important, and I don't necessarily love it when movies are like called capital I important, but this one kind of just, it is, it is. And it's an important history lesson. It's also incredibly well acted. It's a story so well told, and even though it is over 3 hours, it earns every single minute of it to create a monumental experience, especially when it gets to the end and it does get to the modern day scenes of the descendants lining up to pay tribute to Schindler. I mean, just it's so powerful. So easy victory for Schindler's List here for me.
Yeah, definitely. So. It's a very intimate look at a global situation, really. Exactly. I mean, it was a huge, the Holocaust obviously was something that had very far-reaching and lasting impact, and this takes that and looks at it through the eyes of one person in a very beautiful way. So.
Yeah, it's the power of film.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this has been yet another fantastic discussion. Thank you, Karen, for that discussion.
Thank you.
And tell the fine people where they can find you all over the internet.
Well, the easiest thing is just follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Karen M. Peterson, and because there you can find links to my work at AwardsCircuit. You can find me at Citizen Dame and the Watch and Talk, and also you can just go to Rotten Tomatoes and find me there too. So
yes, you can. Don't undersell it.
It's really exciting. Oh my gosh.
It's amazing. Come on. I mean,
thank you.
It's so cool. Also, Eric Anderson, my friend, is also on Rotten Tomatoes now, so I'm feeling great right now.
Yeah, look at you.
I mean, I had nothing to do with any of it, but like, I'm just saying, like, it's very nice, and I'm glad to see my friends doing so well.
And your time is coming too.
Well, maybe. I need to actually start writing more reviews.
Well, they're actually moving toward certifying podcasts too, so.
Okay, well, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had no idea, so.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson, and you can find the podcast at Oscar Runner Up. You can find the show at Apple Podcasts /iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, where you can rate, review, and subscribe. And I now leave it up to you listening at home to vote on whether you think Schindler's List deserved to win Best Picture or if The Piano should have won. And you can do that at my website at filmtrophies.com, or you can email me at filmtrophies@gmail.com. Whew. Okay. Thank you, Karen, again.
Thank you. I'm really dying to see who votes for The Piano on this one.
Yeah. You never know. And I will bid you all adieu.